Woo! Oh, man. All right. It's on. The microphone's on. The camera's on. All right. Oh, man. Shit, Colts Nation. I think we are back. Now, that right there, that was a long, long nap that I just took right there. But did I really miss anything at all in the month of June? Can we be honest about it? Did I miss anything in the month of June? Doesn't matter either way, because here we are back weekly going forward. We are in the month of July. That means two things for Colts fans, and I guess football fans as a whole, right? Number one, this right here is the last month until the end of this upcoming season without a football game. That right there is good news for everyone involved. And then number two, and most importantly for us, is that Colts training camp is right around the corner. I personally will be in attendance on July 27th and July 28th. That right there is opening weekend. I've booked my flight from JFK, John F. Kennedy Airport, out there in New York City, around 800 miles away from Naptown. I've booked my Airbnb, my rent-a-car, all that good stuff. We are in business. Taking some lessons from my last visit to Indianapolis. Lesson number one, do not cheap out on the Airbnb, right? Last year I went there, and we'll get to the content at some point, but let me just catch you guys up a little bit, right? It's been a while since we spoke, has it not? Regardless, last time I cheaped out on the Airbnb. It was like $188, something like that, for a few nights, and the pictures that were on the profile, it didn't look like the nicest Airbnb in the world, but what I did not expect was to walk into what was essentially like a, oh goodness, how would I describe it? It was like, you ever see those, there's like homes that you could buy on Amazon for like $100,000 that you just build up, and they're essentially just like you walk in. I mean, dude, if I spread my legs in the bathroom or anything, that sounded kind of weird. My point is that it was no space whatsoever. It was like the worst Airbnb I've ever had in my entire life. And the host, no disrespect to her, kind lady, was kind of a little bit weird and left me a bad review because the way the door was so complicated. Listen, I'm no genius, right? But I'd like to believe I understand how to open and close and lock a door. Like, these are all things I've been taught growing up in my life. The door, I mean, I have never in my life had such issues with a door. She ends up leaving a bad review that I didn't do a great job closing and locking the door on the way out. That the big bad wolf could have blown that house down. I mean, it was one of those situations. So regardless, that was my lesson. I booked a nice studio out. Let me not say the town, but I booked a nice studio somewhere in between Indianapolis, the city of, and Westfield, Indiana, where Grand Park is located, which is where the Colts do training camp. Going to be a much nicer experience for me this time. Hopefully I get to explore the city a little bit more, and hopefully within the Airbnb I could actually record a little bit of content so you guys kind of aren't waiting for the trip. I will be there from the 26th through the 28th into the morning of the 29th before ultimately flying back to New York. Regardless, I digress. Just figured I'd let you guys know that, right? We have to start teeing up the season that is coming up right now for the Indianapolis Colts. And today I just want to start simple, right? I want to start small. I want to warm up a little bit. It's been a while. Today we're going to be covering 5 players on the Indianapolis Colts that I feel are being somewhat underappreciated, kind of on the internets, on the interweb, going into this season. Now, these are not the only 5. There could be others. In fact, you could probably make a whole nother list of 5 guys that don't include anyone on this list. But these are the 5 that came to mind when I was thinking about what we should be talking about coming out here, to start the month and ultimately as we ease our way into the season. Now, is underappreciated the exact word to describe this? Maybe not, right? But it's the best word I can think of to describe it in this moment. Now, I'm not talking about players that are like rookies and just like deep, deep sleepers, if you will, right? I'm talking about some players that we have on the roster that were here last year, that we're familiar with, that seem to be getting overshadowed by some of the other offseason stories. Anthony Richardson's shoulder and the rookie class, particularly Latu and Mitchell, all these guys, right? No reach in here for hot takes, talking about players that will be making an impact for the Indianapolis Colts coming up this season that we're not talking about. Without further ado, let's get into it. Well, I guess, hold on, right? I got to introduce myself. In fact, some of you might have even forgotten who I am. My name is Justin. This right here is the Right on the Bench Colts podcast. As always, I ask anyone enjoying the video episode, go ahead, shoot it a like. Going to help me get out to as many Colts fans as humanly possible. Audio listeners, leave a 5-star review. If you're enjoying the content, let the people know how much you like it. If you don't like it, just shut off the episode. There's no need to be negative. There's no need to leave a 1-star. I don't want your criticisms. I just want you to enjoy. Of course, as I said, go into training camp. If you want to be here for that coverage, see some of the content hopefully I make on the trip, particularly my insights coming out of it for those of you who can't make it to training camp, particularly some of the guys that, and girls, right, that are not located in Indiana. Say that 5 times fast. In Indiana. Regardless, for those of you who are Colts fans from outside the state who can't make it down to training camp, I'm going to be the guy. I'm making the travel so you don't have to do it. Go ahead, shoot, subscribe before that time comes. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's the housekeeping. My room is hot. I had to shut off the air conditioner because I think the microphone picks it up. But that's besides the point. Let's start with player number 1. Obvious one. Well, really not obvious. I think some of you guys are going to be like, what do you mean he's overlooked? I'll explain my case. Jonathan freaking Taylor. Let's start right there. I mean, how quickly things can change. The league moves very, very fast, right? We went from essentially an MVP season out of Jonathan Taylor in 2021. Now, I know he was not literally the MVP of the NFL, but you cannot tell the story of the 2021 NFL season, not just as a Colts fan, but as a football fan, without talking about Jonathan Taylor and his ascension into superstardom, right? That season, regular season, was in many ways defined by that breakout campaign. But since then, we had an injury-riddled 2022 season, followed by a holdout that many of us pretended were injury issues. Now, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. I don't want to sit here and accuse Jonathan, right? No need to open up old wounds here, right? But point being, it took Jonathan Taylor a while to get back into the flow of things going into last season. But I thought as the year ended, he really started to come into his own, particularly with a huge game against the Texans, which we would all like to repress, right? Obviously, that game isn't one that we think of particularly fondly, that we don't remember in a great light. But also, JT had nearly 200 yards rushing in that game, and we should not overlook that. Now, I'm not saying that there's anyone out there claiming JT is done, that he's cooked, that he's washed, or that he's not going to be an impact player for the Indianapolis Colts. But I do feel that when we compare it to how he was viewed and kind of the hysteria that was surrounding Jonathan Taylor, like the run the damn ball, like I have a sweatshirt with him busting through a brick wall like the Kool-Aid man, that has cooled down quite a bit. And my evidence for this, other than just kind of looking around and just kind of getting a feel for it on my own, right now, albeit not official, this is not an official prop that's out there, but the over-unders for JT on rushing yards for the entire 17-game season are hovering around that 1,050 mark. Now, listen, do I think he's going to rush for 1,800 to 2,000 yards? No, probably not. We don't need him to, in my opinion, for this offense to succeed. But excuse me, 1,050 yards would be an average of 62 yards per game in a 17-game season. And it ain't like our boy JT is old. JT is still fresh. He's 25 years of age. He's in an offense now that appears to have all the makings of one that's very dynamic, very explosive. A lot of options in this offense, which should help take some of the attention off of Jonathan Taylor and hopefully open up some more holes for him going into the season. Help keep this offense a little bit more predictable. If that line opens at 1,050 yards on the over-under for Jonathan Taylor on a season-long rushing yards number, that seems like a pretty safe over for me, barring injury, of course, which you can never plan for. Now, I really, really like JT's odds of establishing himself as one of the clear-cut best running backs in the NFL once more this year. And I feel like Colts fans, to some degree, have kind of forgotten exactly what this guy brings to this offense. I think we're going to see it this year. Player number 2, Trey Sermon. Let's keep it in the backfield. Now, full transparency with Trey Sermon, I've always been a fan of his, right? I was super happy when the Colts picked him up, and a lot of people seem to be acting as if the Colts don't have a backup running back on the roster that can be trusted. And the reason they say they don't, right, or that they don't have that guy is simply because they have Trey Sermon. Perhaps you're not high on him, but the Colts, make no mistake, are. They didn't have to keep him. Sure, letting Zach Moss walk was somewhat logical given the fact that he was, kind of in position to get a starting job elsewhere, but they could have been active in that market. Now, albeit they were not active in any market, if we're being 100% honest here, but running back would have been something easy to plug, particularly if you had no one there. The Colts believe in Trey Sermon. We're talking about a former third-round pick out of Ohio State. There has never, ever been any question in this league about Trey Sermon's ability with the ball in his hands. Super shifty, downhill runner, always been a 4 to 5 yard per carry type of guy, which is a magical number in this league. I mean, if you could get a guy to do that, you're talking a first, if you, in theory, right? We're just talking per the numbers, 10 yards for a first down. If you just handed it off to Trey Sermon 3 times in a row, as per the numbers, you would just get a first down every time. I know that's a broad stroke, and I know that's not literally true. There's complexities to that type of thing. My point is that 4 to 5 yards a carry is plenty. The guy just all around looks the part, right? There's no need to overcomplicate the analysis. We know a guy that can play when we see a guy that can play. All of that being said, the reason Trey Sermon has yet to hold down a job in this league, again, has nothing to do with his talent. It has to do with concerns about ball security. He's had issues fumbling the football in his career, plain and simple. But in 35 carries for us last year, that was not only 0 fumbles lost, 0 fumbles, period. Now, that's not the biggest sample size. This much I understand. But at 25 years old, he's still young. He's still learning. Perhaps he's learned his lesson. Last preseason, Trey Sermon was playing for the Philadelphia Eagles, and he had started the game against the Browns. That started the game. When he came into the game against the Browns, let me try to speak as proper as I possibly can, he basically immediately lost a fumble and was like super discouraged on the sideline. And sure enough, you have the announcers talking about what I'm talking about right now. Like, that's the reason he got cut from the Niners, et cetera, right? Jalen Hurts gives him a little talking to on the sideline. The way he responded after that fumble in that game, to me, says a lot about who he is as a player and kind of his upside. And I'm really, really high on what he brings to us this season. I think he's going to seamlessly fit into Zach Moss's role. And barring injury, I think the Colts end up with a stellar 1-2 punch at running back, potentially in contention to be one of the best 1-2 punches in all of the league. And then I guess if you count AR, 1-2-3 punch, right? But if we just stick to the running back room, I think Jonathan Taylor, Trey Sermon is going to prove to be a really, really good-looking group going into that. Evan Hull, kind of just on a side note, am I super high on what Evan Hull brings to the table? Not particularly. My reason in saying that is I would like them to bring in some training camp competition to this running back room. We're looking at Jonathan Taylor. We're looking at Trey Sermon. Great. For me personally, great. But Evan Hull and Tyler Goodson behind him, not saying neither of those guys could become a good RB3. All I'm saying is I would like a couple more options just to see, right? Okay. Number 3 player, Josh Downs. I told you, I'm not reaching too deep on these, right? But last year, Josh Downs coming out of the draft was like the golden boy of that draft class for the fans, right? That was our future superstar wide receiver. Now, the seasons have changed, and with the seasons changing, so does the flavor of the month, right? And the flavor of the month, as it stands, is Adonai Mitchell, right? He's getting all of the attention. And in all fairness, there's nobody more guilty of hyping that guy up than yours truly right here, right? But the thing about Josh Downs that I like, and this was true going into last season, this is why I predicted he was going to have a pretty solid role on the team early and often, is that he is a specialist. And not only a specialist, he's a specialist at slot receiver. That means, generally speaking, the slot receiver is the easiest receiver to get the ball to. One, because they're generally lined up closer to the quarterback. So in terms of just the distance you need to put on the throw, not that our quarterback, there's any questions about his arm strength, but just in terms of the trajectory, it's easier to get the ball to the slot who's right next to you than the guy on the outside who's even further. Because you have to think, when you're thinking about a throw that's 20 yards down the field, sure, in terms of yardage that counts in the game, a 20-yard throw is a 20-yard throw. But they're not all built the same, right? Because it's not, if you're throwing 20 yards straight, that's 20 yards, right? Whoopsie daisy, hit the microphone. But when you take into the fact that there's an angle next to you, am I over-explaining? My point is that 20 is really 25 when you take the distance that you have to go horizontally as well, and then even further down the field. Is that making sense? I don't want to sit there and harp on that too much. Point being, he's the type of guy that often is going to be on a higher percentage type of throw. the kind of like the drive starting type of throws, get the quarterback into a rhythm. And Josh Downs, I thought, flashed some great stuff last year. I'm still just as high on him as ever. I think still, just like last season, Josh Downs is the only person on this offense that brings what he brings specifically. And I think because of that, we're going to see a real good season out of him. I would not be shocked to see Josh Downs in that 100 reception range. Now, I'm not saying he's going to hit 100 receptions, but what I am saying is that an average of 5 receptions per game over the course of 17 games would be 85 receptions total. One injury hitting the offense or a bigger role than we expected for Josh Downs will be, in my opinion, is going to result in him being talked about much differently on a league-wide level than he is as we currently stand by season's end. Fourth player, I want to switch it back to the defensive side of the ball. I think it's my only defensive player here. And I want to talk a little bit about Rodney Thomas, right? Because he was not very good last year, right? Following a really strong rookie campaign, particularly for a 7th rounder. That's another 7th rounder that came in and played pretty well for the Indianapolis Colts. Last year, Jalen Jones is the guy. Hopefully his sophomore campaign doesn't look anything like Rodney Thomas's sophomore campaign, right? But in that rookie year for Rodney Thomas, not only was it like, okay, he's a solid 7th round pick, we were talking about a guy that we thought actually had the upside to be an integral piece of this rebuilding secondary. But again, that sophomore year was so ugly. Like, ugly enough to a point where they were putting Ronnie Harrison out there over him, who's a linebacker converted to safety. Now, I happen to like Ronnie Harrison quite a bit, right? It's not really meant to be a slight on him. My point is simply that if you said that that was going to happen going into the season, people would have called you crazy. Nobody saw that coming whatsoever. And you think about all the problems that the Indianapolis Colts had last year. Of course, Anthony Richardson getting injured was one of them, but most of them had everything to do with that secondary, right? Yet they haven't really done all that much to bolster up that room. They're going for the continuity approach. Some people are okay with that. Some people are not. Really not my point. Now, we know that we have Julian Blackmon out there. We know that we have Nick Cross. And we have some of these rookies that we got coming in. Some of these versatile guys in the secondary. We'll kind of see where they fall in, right? But if the Colts secondary is to turn this thing around this season, particularly early on in the season, make no mistake, Rodney Thomas coming out and having a bounce-back campaign and at least a rotational role at safety is sure going to be a part of that equation. I'm very, very curious to see how he looks going into training camp. I'm simply just hoping to see somebody not named Julian Blackmon in that safety room make some plays when I go to training camp, period. Rodney Thomas, I bring up specifically because he should have a leg up on most of the competition due to the fact that, albeit he's young and inexperienced maybe by a league-wide standpoint, when you look at the Colts secondary going into your 3rd season, that's kind of experienced, right? So he should have a leg up, and he has all you need, given what they have in that room right now, to be the guy that kind of pulls ahead, him and Nick Cross, right? And we'll kind of just see how that works out. So he's a guy. 5th player and final player for today's show. We'll be talking about more. Don't you worry about it. You're not going to go over a month again without seeing me, maybe next offseason. But we're back, right? We're okay. Kylen Granson is going to be the last guy I mention here, right? Because all the talk is around Jelani Woods right now at the tight end position, who clearly has the most upside, right? And when you talk about an offense being explosive, a guy like Jelani Woods is the type of guy that you really want to try to get going this season, right? And he seems to have been making some plays in minicamp from what I heard, right? I wasn't there. I have the same information that you guys have. But Jelani Woods and Adonai Mitchell were the 2 guys that were being talked about as kind of the playmakers in that minicamp period. But Kylen Granson is a guy who has just been Mr. Reliable for this team. And I think a lot of people forget that this was a 3rd round pick, right? Kylen Granson is not some just throwaway player for the Indianapolis Colts. He's been Mr. Reliable for this team. And I always love what he brings to the table. I expect him to continue to have a role in this offense. Whoever ends up being the starter at tight end for the Indianapolis Colts, we do project that to be Jelani Woods. Make no mistake, is going to have to beat Kylen Granson for this job. As it currently stands, he's kind of the guy, albeit in some sort of a rotation, right? So, again, he's a consistently overlooked part of this offense. I thought he was overlooked going into last season. I think he remains overlooked going into this season. I'm not saying he's a superstar. I'm saying that Kylen Granson is a guy that's going to have an impact. Honorable mention, Mike Lewinsky, Dio and Dangbo, right? Some of these guys in the trenches. I think, again, When I say overlooked, I don't mean that like you guys don't give them credit. I just mean that they're not the topic of conversation, kind of given, some of the motion that we've seen in the offseason. I think a lot of the times the rookie draft is always a story, and then you're talking about the quarterback, right? And that's kind of what we get. Some of these guys right here are just players I'm not seeing too much dialogue about yet, but I have a feeling as the season gets started, these are going to be names we're going to be talking about. Maybe not Rodney Thomas. I more said that as a way to kind of bring attention to the fact that he's a guy that needs to step up for this team, right? So that was an episode after a month. Did I feel rusty? To be honest, I did a little bit. I felt a little bit rusty, but that's to be expected. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Don't worry, you won't go too long without seeing me again. I promise you that. I will be back very, very soon. Coming soon, I would say probably by Monday or Tuesday. I don't know. I'm starting to work with someone on, this is just, right, episode's over. So if you only care about the Colts, get out of here. But like just for like those of you who are interested in the process and the show and stuff like that, I'm going to start getting more clips out there. I've been trying to think about stuff that could expand the show coming into the season. I thought we made really, really good headway last season, thanks to all of you. Anyone who comes up here and shows up and engages in comments, I mean, you guys have really, really helped the growth of this page, and I think make it a particularly unique Colts page to be on. Like, I think people get more views than me and stuff like that, but in terms of engagement and dialogue in the comment section, I think we have a pretty unique community over here. I'm trying to think of how we could expand that to more people. So my bandwidth is only so much, just making the episodes and planning for them and all that shit. And it's hard enough, right? I have a full-time job. This isn't what I do for a living. So I've always been trying to get clips out there. I kind of know how to do it myself, at least good enough. But not only could it be done better, but it could just be outsourced so I have more time to do other things. And that's what we're doing. So I'm working on I'm working the terms out with someone, and I'll be paying someone, right? I'm going to be taking a little bit of my money that I don't have, paying someone to do some clips. We're going to be, obviously, Instagram we have the clips here. TikTok is going to be the big addition. I don't use TikTok. I'm not the guy. So I'm just going to be posting and leaving on there. But I'm trying to expand it, right? I want to bring up some of these. I want to create a smarter Colts fan, right? And you got to get them while they're young, right? And TikTok is the place to be. There's so much visibility to be had over there. And that's kind of one of the big things I want to have coming into this season is expanding this community really beyond just the YouTube page. Yes, we have the Instagram page, but right now in terms of just sheer Colts fans, YouTube's where it's at. I want to try to expand that to other socials as well. So that's a big change that's coming very, very soon. We're talking like in the next week, just finalizing those terms. And other than that, that's pretty much it. That was an episode right there. My name is Justin. This right here is the Riding the Bench Colts podcast. As always, go Colts.